To begin with, very, very happy to chat up with you, Usha. Let me just tell you that discovering you and your stories has made me feel that I'm a better father, because I'm going to make sure my kids are also going to read your books. They've already begun with it. Now, Usha, to just start off and just give the audience a bit of a teaser to know a bit more of your life. As such, you grew up in Trivandrum. You had a father who was a forest officer. Your later years were in Gujarat, Anand. You wrote a book called How to Write, and then you realized, let me just go ahead and write stories also. And then finally, this beautiful book called The Zoo in My Backyard happened. Tell me your life in Trivandrum. How did that start? What is that influence in your book now?
Well, as you already said, I grew up in Trivandrum. I'm fortunate to be sandwiched between two elder sisters and two younger brothers. So we have five siblings, growing up in a very typical South Indian joint family with the uncles and aunts and grandmother, grandfather, and of course my parents. My father was hardly ever around because he was in the IFS and he had to travel. His journey took him largely into the forests of Kerala. So what he would do is he would bring back any injured or orphaned animal, cub, which we would look after. And once we showered our love and made it our pet. And then finally, we would very happily send the animal back to the zoo, Trivandrum Zoo, one of the oldest actually in India. And so what happened was every time we would wait for our father to come and we would wait for him to leave because we didn't know what kind of a surprise he had for us. But I never realized that even though in school my friends used to say, we went past your house, we saw you with a black monkey on your shoulder. And I sort of really didn't realize what an idiot I am, what a very, very unique upbringing that was. And my father passed away in 2006. By then, I had already written two books. And I never had the opportunity to thank him for such a unique upbringing. So I thought I should, high time, I wrote something about it. And I wrote a series of humorous articles for the Deccan Herald. And this came between 2007 and 8. And I already started getting mails from readers. It used to be called Kookaburra Laughs. It came in the Open Sesame supplement of the newspaper. So they would ask me, when are you coming out with a book? But then at the same time, when I remembered my obligation to my father, and I also realized the kind of upbringing he had given us, very extreme, high sense of environment and our need to preserve. So that's when I happened to see this lake in my backyard from my balcony, which was on the verge of extinction. So on one hand, I'm telling myself, no, you don't know anything about lake conservation. Your father would have helped you, but he's not there. So you mind your own business. You are supposed to be a writer. Please write. But on the other hand, my father's voice, look, what is the upbringing? What is the point in teaching you all this if you can't save a lake? And I realized after 1.5 years that if I keep quiet and watch a lake die, then I'm partly responsible for its demise. So I plunged myself into a dry lake, getting BBMP to revive it, and then transforming it together with my friends through my trust, the Puttanalli Neighborhood Lake Improvement Trust. We happen to be the first official citizen custodians of the lake in Bangalore.
Fab. In fact, I want to just bring your book right back into the scene right now, because this book is all about these characters who are animals, who practically the family made their own. You were called the Devil's Family. Why was that? Your family was called the Devil's Family. Why did that happen?
Yeah, because my younger brother Kumar, he was a huge fan of this Phantom Comics.
Indrajal Comics.
And Indrajal, exactly. Right. Phantom Comics, and Phantom had this hero.
The horse.
A white horse, and a part wolf, part hound dog called Devil. So he would beg and plead with my father, Anna, please get me a wolf. So my father compromised by getting him a Rajapalayam hound. And the point is, this fellow, he being one of the best hounds in our country, native species, the moment my brother would remove the leash, this fellow would vamoose. and he would trail. My brother would not let go of the leash, and he would go hanging and come back after some time, fully bruised. And it created so much of anxiety in my mother, especially because her firstborn son, poor fellow, fair, thin, puny, getting all these bruises on his chest, and the family, the neighbors were very, very entertained. And really, I remember once we went for a Navaratri celebration to somebody's house, and there was a little girl there. She shouted, "Amma, devil's family has come." I tell you. Anyway.
Oh boy. You want to read something from there? Or I think you should.
I think you should, there are lots of other excerpts now that
you must go to the one with the fish in the front yard. I think that would be very, very exciting.
It was a very, very conservative, actually conservative family, but my grandmother could not put her foot down because my father was doing his research on fish gill. And he said, look, if you don't allow me to keep the fish at home, then I'm likely to give up on my study. So she had to keep quiet. And we didn't have these tiny little fish ponds, this aquarium. We had these huge cement tanks. And, I'll read now from this.
Please.
A typical day in the life of a fish is the same as the rest of its life, especially for homebred ones living in safe confines. It would have been the same for our gill friends too, except that it began to rain one day and the next day and the next. Anna covered the smaller tank with an asbestos sheet. The fancy fish were too delicate to withstand drastic differences in temperature, he explained. It rained while we slept snug in our beds. Come morning, we opened the door and looked out. The rain had ceased, but the leaves dripped water, and the front yard had become a pond. Clearly, the drainage was up to its usual trick. It had choked on debris and made a pond of the place. Now, this pond was alive with fish. Rainwater had poured into the uncovered tank, raised the level to the brim, and flown out, taking the fish with it. The excitement, so rare in their poor lives, was making them jump out of the water and fall back with a plop. Grab them, Anna shouted. We didn't wait to hear more. We snatched buckets, big vessels, and the nearest containers and rushed out. The blighters didn't want to get caught. They slipped and slithered and slid from our hands. We plucked them as they frolicked in and out of the water, held their squirming bodies tight, and dropped them into our container. By the time all the fish had been rounded up and deposited back into the tank, we had sloshed around so much that we looked like wet eels ourselves. That was one of the happiest mornings of our life.
Lovely. The characters in your book, obviously, other than the animals, there's Anna, your dad, your 5 siblings, there's your grandfather who the dog bows in front of, etc., etc. I think you have a mind of a child. These things can't be manufactured. There has to be a feeling that has to come. You have to remember these feelings that are there. How in the world do you even remember them? Forget capturing it. How does it come? When does it come from? Unless you were so invested in a childhood that was so special, it can't come. Where is that from? That childlike innocence coming into your work. What are the source?
See, when I'm writing anything, I like to get into the world of my characters and into their personalities. And this was easy for me, actually, because I was just going back into my past. So I simply immersed myself into that and tried to imagine, remember what my reaction was and how my siblings reacted. So that is how I think it just came from the heart.
Is it also because of perhaps a loss? I guess your dad passed away not too long ago. Did that in some way affect and made you remember things of the past in such detail that it had to be put down into a story which happened to be so joyous, so full of sunshine?
Because our childhood was so happy. So it had to. I'm not going to write a VP book about something which was not there. Like, I had a very unique and absolutely exhilarating childhood. I realized the difference when, I didn't honestly give this kind of an upbringing to my children, because I realized how much it entails for to look after a pet and a child. So in a sense, this book made me realize my mother's worth much more, because she had to look after the five of us. She had to look after a big family, the eldest daughter-in-law, and she had to look after all the animals and birds. And there was one particular incident. She used to be typically happy when the animals were finally taken off to the zoo, though she would know if something else was going to come. And one particular black monkey called Suku, he was very attached to the my mother, because none of us would go near him. He had a very, very sensitive stomach, and he would always fart. And Suku in Tamil, Suku is the reverse of the word, okay, which I shall not say now. And so we kept away. And my mother, being such a kind soul that she is, she looked after Suku. And when he had to be taken to the zoo, I don't know who cried more. He sat on my mother's lap, and then he was hugging her. My mother was crying, and he was crying. And the more he cried, the more he farted, so the further we went. So really hats off to my mother for this. So at the end of the book, I think it made me understand my mother much better and appreciate her, honestly.
On that question, I mean, this is, I want to ask you this. There was this bear that stayed with you for some time, and then it was taken to the zoo. You were attached to that bear. It was called, what is the bear called?
Actually, we weren't attached to it, because he came home, he was hardly there for
Right,
a very short while.
And then
he was such a grouchy bear, so we took him out to the zoo.
And then you go to the cage, and you try and try to recognize, I mean, at least trying to make him feel that, what, it's me. But he didn't recognize you at all.
Actually, we had a better rapport with another black monkey called Keshavan, and we would go to the cage and we didn't know, one black monkey looks like other black monkeys in a cage of black monkeys. So we would generally call out, Keshava! And from wherever he is, he would come to us, and he would put his little paw, and he would try to reach out to us. And visitors would say, what the hell is happening here?
You read something
from
something? Or whatever. In fact, what I wanted to ask you was, the question really is, now you get attached to an animal, and then it goes away. And then somewhere a part of you feels absolutely broken. I think a lot of us may not be having pets because of the heartbreak that comes when the pet goes away. Just tell me, am I making sense over here, or what is your take on that?
No, you are very true. But then this book also talks about the life, like just because we are so attached to our parents doesn't mean that they're going to be with us forever. So these are very, very close parts of our members in our family. So we are all, at the end of the day, birds of passage. We are here today. We need to move out.
That makes sense.
So we understood the pattern of life, that you come and you are with, make the most of your relationships, make the most of your days, make the most of what you have been blessed with, and then move on. But in my case, I looked back. I'm looking back with a lot of happiness in this book. But you are also saying that this is one of the reasons, the heartbreak, potential heartbreak, that makes people don't want to have pets. And I think they are missing out a great deal. And I feel very sorry for my children and my granddaughter for not having a pet. So this was my compromise. You'll please read about this book. And they say, oh yeah, you had such a wonderful childhood and you're not giving us the same. So it works both ways.
Would you want to read a passage?
I would like to actually read about another dog that we had, a Pomeranian. And
Maxie,
absolutely. So you asked about how I was as a kid. Actually, all of us had special aptitudes, and mine was reading. And I had another passion, which was arguing. So if I was not reading, I was picking up a quarrel with my siblings, uncles, aunts, servants, anyone really who dared to disagree with me. I became good at splitting hairs, asserting, maintaining, and concluding. So my mother decided, you are arguing so much only because your head is empty. You need to occupy it. So she got us a music teacher, and she got me a music teacher. the moment the music sir came, all my siblings came around to see who was the new person who's come. And the moment they had said music class, all of them vanished. And I will confess to fondness for music, though I can't sing. And I did stay on. And the sir said, at least let one more child join, because one girl coming all this distance is not worth my time. So my elder sister Vijaya, she's still the very obedient, very silent. She's now a cardiologist, and she was very fascinated only with the books. But my mother said, no, Vijaya, you have to join Usha and sing with her. So the thing was, she would actually keep a textbook in the music textbook. And I had a loud enough voice for both of us. And the moment the sir would open up the harmonium, and he would, he would pull out the knobs of the harmonium to adjust the airflow, flip open the latch, and that held the bellows in place and tested the three main notes of sa, pa, sa. And that was a signal for Vijaya to open a textbook and for me to sing the 7 notes in 3 speeds, one after the other, beating time with my right hand on my thigh. Maxie had to join. My Pomeranian had to join, because when we tried without him with me, he howled so much that he drowned everybody's voices. So the sir very reluctantly agreed to Maxie to join me. The condition was, I'll keep Maxie next to me and hold him tight. So the first time this happened, I felt a quiver run through Maxie. He threw my hand aside and sat up. He raised his face and howled long and loud. It startled the sir into crashing his hand on the harmonium keys, and Vijaya forgot to hide the school book before everybody came running to the room. The sir stopped the singing for the class for the day, but then discontinued altogether, because Mani, that's my mother, banned Maxie from joining me. That day, we discovered that Maxie loved music. To compensate for his missing the lessons, I would sing with him, or rather, I would sing and he would howl loud and clear.
Fabulous. Thank you. You bring your character, especially the animals, to life with these real names, Keshav, Maxie, Devon, and a whole lot of others. They almost become humans for me. I can see it. It's a very visual book, people. Very, very visual. I can see that monkey who's chained and creating havoc by just removing the fuse, putting it back, removing it, putting it back, and making the family's life almost miserable. I want to understand, do we become better human beings when we engage with animals, when we have them around us, or when we actually feel for them? I'm not just talking about the 4-legged one. I'm talking about birds. I'm talking about worms. I'm talking about anything that's there. Do you become a better human being?
I think definitely, because when a child has a pet to look after, that teaches him or her much greater sense of responsibility than any parents can do. And it makes the parents also better parents, because they are actually inculcating a lot of sensitivity in their children. So I would genuinely really say, even though I told you that my children didn't grow up with pets, we did have a dog actually. So I would definitely say that even if you're not able to have a pet, I think sensitize them to the environment around. You don't have to live with a huge house and a big backyard and a front yard like we did. But even just look at those trees outside, you will listen to a bird call. And open your ears. It's such a beautiful world outside. You will see a butterfly. You will see even a beautiful spider's web. It's a wonderful world. And I think the best gift we can do to our children is to show them how wonderful the natural world is.
Can you make a bird call?
I can, certainly. I used to be pretty good at that, at imitating. I had a parrot called Sita. Actually, it's a rose-ring parakeet called Sitacula crameri. And my father was not around when I got this parakeet as a fledgling. So I decided, we didn't know the gender. So I said, if it turns out to be a boy, I will call him Pitta. And if it turns out to be a call, Sita. So I named him Sita with a P silent. And I would do a very good imitation of him calling my youngest brother to study, which was Chichu, Padina, Padina. But I would like to read about something else, just so that you don't have any excuse to say, I can't have pets, I can't have a bird, I can't have a fish. So, what we used to do was the five of us, the moment we heard an Asian quail, we would run out of the house. And as difficult as it is to see the cuckoo in the tree, it is very easy to coo. The first call of the cuckoo is a smooth, level coo with a slight dip between the oo and the oo. It is so irresistible that the moment we heard the first coo, we rushed out of the house, looked up at the various trees to locate, and cooed in as many pitches as we were a number. We usually overwhelmed the bird and either flew off in a blur of black or waited for us to leave. If it was not intimidated by us and our medley, it returned the call. So several years later, I heard a cuckoo call from the neem tree outside my window, and I wondered if I still had my flair for birdsong. The only way to find out was to test the vocal cords there and there. I returned a soft, tentative coo. There was no returning call. My heart sank. Before it could hit the bottom, however, the bird called back inquiringly, coo. Yes, I hadn't lost touch. The confidence showed in my reply. The cuckoo replied with a counter, coo. I peered outside. He was bold in his summons, but seemed a shy fellow otherwise, flitting from branch to branch and taking care to keep out of my sight. Our scales grew sharper, shriller, shorter. Normally, the bird would have stopped after a few calls, but this one was made of sterner stuff. He was not going to be the first one to concede defeat. Well, neither was I. I cooed back while my eyes bored through the branches for the pestilential bird. He seemed to have gone to the other side of the house. I followed his call and went through one room after another. The bird was somewhere close at hand. Chichu's room was open. It was my turn to coo. I called and pushed open the door. There was Chichu looking out of his window and returning my coo. We gaped at each other as the realization sank in. We had been the cuckoos. Red-faced, he busied himself with his books, and I beat a hasty retreat without a whisper. He didn't know that he had his revenge for all my Chichu, Parida in Sita's voice. Thank you.
My question really is, who's your youngest fan and who's your oldest fan?
Actually, ever since this book came out, I have been getting some videos from and photographs from people. I think the youngest one may perhaps be 7-year-old Avni.
Very heartening to have young readers.
Yeah, she's been really systematically. She's only 7 and she's been reading the book and laughing over it. And just yesterday, I got another photograph of a boy. He's 9 years, 11 months. And I would like to name him here. His name is Krishna. And he told me that ever since he and his mother read the book, the mother calls him Kuttan, which was actually our baby elephant, which my mother got angry and threw out of the house after 2 days. So the oldest, I don't know whether he would like to be called, but one of the senior people, he was a doctor. He's Dr. Vinod Bhatt from, I think he's the executive director of Manipal, Mahe institution. So he's posted in the Twitter that this book is a good read for people from 8 to 80. But so far, no 80-year-old has contacted me. So I look forward to hearing from them as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, you see a person over here. Just don't have the gray hair. She has a nice, clean forehead, a heart of a child, and that's reflective in the books, in the stories that she's written. I think it's a classic. It'll last forever. I think you've done great justice to the time that you spend as a child, and every child can live through that. It'll inspire people. I believe that if you read it, it'll inspire you to love animals, be more compassionate towards them, and be involved with them, be engaged with them. I think your life is reflective in the life that you lead also, which is saving lives, etc. Absolute honor, absolute pleasure, and very, very happy that you actually created this beautiful work of art in the zoo in my backyard. People, please pick it up down there. Engage with her after this. You must catch her before she leaves the venue. You will be touched for life. Thank you, Usha.
I would like to thank Subodh and Atagalata